I got a poem. Want to hear it?
Yeah.
Daddy, can I read a poem?
Okay.
Midnight chaos, eternity chaos, morning chaos, eternity chaos, noon chaos, eternity chaos, evening chaos, eternity chaos, midnight chaos, eternity chaos, morning chaos, eternity chaos, noon chaos, evening chaos, eternity chaos, midnight chaos, eternity chaos, morning chaos, eternity chaos, noon chaos, eternity chaos, evening chaos, eternity chaos,
right.
midnight chaos, eternity chaos,
It's
noon
all right.
chaos, evening chaos, eternity chaos, midnight
Come
chaos,
on.
eternity chaos,
Julian, cut it out.
morning chaos, eternity chaos.
By repeating chaos,
No.
you don't even, it doesn't even rhyme.
Oh, that ended abruptly. I was going to say a bit like our season, but that seemed to take forever to end, and we're here to discuss that tonight with two fine guests, two fine gentlemen, Dave and Fraser. Dave, how have you been since Saturday, reconciling with our plummet back to the non-league?
Yeah, there's a lot of people getting punted at the minute, so I'm just glad that I've made your particular retained list, Jonny, and you've asked me back. Not quite ready to face up to the full grim horror of returning to the National League, but it was all over bar the shouting, wasn't it? So yeah, not feeling too bad, to be honest.
Certainly was. Great record by Anne Sexton there. Good reference to get us going. Fraser, what about you? You look pretty gloopy there.
I had to regroup and take myself to a wedding on Sunday, but thankfully there was some Barovians there. There was no cause for any Barovians to be there, but there's always Barovians there. So I had a nice chat with some people there, and I'm so National League pilled now. I've secured a ticket to the South Shields versus Kidderminster Harriers match on Saturday. So I'm gonna be indoctrinating myself in that level of football. That's sold out, whatever in South Shields Stadium is called.
Yeah, that's it. In for a penny, in for a pound. Let's get on with it, then, eh?
That was the week that was. It's over. Let it go.
Right, so I suppose we'll start with the confirmation of our relegation, which is always a bit of a different feeling, isn't it, after the inevitability of it. Can't get words out there. After the Cambridge game, and really what felt like that after the Walsall game, after the hope that was sprung after the great Oldham win, it was confirmed on Saturday after a 2-1 loss to Newport. Dave, I mean, we'd have to touch upon the game too much. I suppose there's no point going back over that. Pretty much like the podcast last week when we didn't want to relive the misery of Cambridge. Let's start with the aftermath and the statement that came after it. What was your kind of thoughts when you read that?
I think it was. I mean, they weren't pulling punches, were they? Even in that very first line. They weren't seeking to kind of sugarcoat anything. It has been a grim season, and right at the end of the statement, I think it was at the end of the statement, the board took responsibility for it, which ultimately they are the people who make the decisions, and that includes employing other people to make decisions. So yeah, the air on Saturday was thick with rumour and counter rumour, and everything was swirling, and some people were saying their farewells, and obviously other people weren't actually at Holker Street to say their farewells. So I kind of got when I was reading the statement, I was thinking, well, it's all very well saying we know what's gone wrong, and we know, well, hopefully we know how to fix it. And I think with the start of, we've started to reappoint people with the news earlier this evening that we've got a new head of medical. So even though we are CEO-less and various other people have departed, there's obviously plates being spun in the background. And you would like to think, as we kind of opined on this podcast last week or the week before, that what was going to be the summer review has been brought forward by a matter of, weeks and maybe even months, and we're going to swing into action. So I'm actually quite encouraged that we're not kind of sitting on our hands as a club and just waiting to see what happens and having a big long chin stroking session where we all agree that it wasn't us to blame, it was everybody else and that sort of thing. So decks are being cleared, and the rebuild is underway. So that's actually that's quite encouraging, actually.
Yeah, definitely. No, we'll come to that. It was quite a long and slow and painful death. I think Steve described it a week in a podcast as kind of death by 1,000 cuts. How did it feel after the game in the crowd, Dave? How would you sort of summarise the mood amongst the popular side?
Oh, we're always a cheery bunch on the popular side, as you all know. It was just a bit kind of, I don't know, it wasn't even funereal. It was just a case of the sense of, right, that's it then. Okay. Let's go home. Let's get on with our lives, and let's all come back next season. It was quite striking. I thought. I mean, I didn't even celebrate the goal because what was the point? And it was just kind of we were fulfilling a contractual obligation last Saturday, weren't we? Really, and obviously the far corner there was full of buoyant Welshmen, and every credit to them. But I don't know whether it's just the circles I mix in, but everyone's kind of fairly time served, so we kind of not shrugged our shoulders, but we've done our grieving. We've all had our kind of personal inquests and who's to blame and what we do and all that sort of thing. So it was almost the case of, right, it's over and done with. The last rites have been read, and let's see what happens over the summer. Because what you're going to do, you're going to walk away. You're going to stop supporting the club that you've supported for decades. No, of course you're not, because you're not an absolute fanny. So yeah, see you all in August.
Yeah, and Fraser, with it confirmed, I mean, how did that kind of land with you? Did it change anything in terms of your reaction to it all, or was it just kind of a relief to sort of actually get it announced and see the process begin?
Yeah, I think I was relieved. I was quite emotional, to be honest, listening. I think the Sam Foley being interviewed by Adam on Radio Cumbria, and then there was some really good contributions from like Chris Altry and some bloke called Tom, who were really quite measured. I just said, look, I would have loved to have said something, but I wasn't quite composed or eloquent enough, so I just went to Dunelm in a huff to buy some bedding, and then went off to a wedding the morning after. But it was. I mean, when we scored, like I said, like what would be a positive outcome, just like a comfortable win. Even if we went down, like there's been times when I support Newcastle United as well, and they got relegated once and then beat stuffed Spurs 5-1 the last day of the season. So like weird things can happen, but I think once that penalty was missed in at the start of the second half, you knew what was coming. Credit to Newport and Christian Fuchs for dragging them and turning them around out of this mess without being too sort of gushing in praise. But it was as has been said, it was just a classic Barrow AFC 25-26 vintage game of football that hopefully we will never have to watch in that way again. It might be the same cast list next season, but hopefully it's a different script.
Yeah, and let's get on to the events since the game, Dave, because we mentioned a statement there before. I think the first thing everybody noticed, I mean, it's a bit like, when you get a bill from somebody and you get your invoice, you go straight to the bottom and look at how much it costs. I think I was probably one of many people went straight to the bottom and said, is Ian Wood's name on there? And I know they said it was a director's statement, but, with him not being in the ground, that was well circulated. His name not being on there, it felt like the writing was on the wall. He's gone now. Do you kind of, is he the fall guy? I mean, how do you kind of sort of sum up this season and his role in it, and where do you think the kind of book stops and with him and where maybe he's kind of had to wear a few as well?
Yeah, it's a funny one. It's a complex one. I know a lot of people have had the pitchforks out for Ian Wood for quite a while, which that's kind of almost the direct correlation with the league position. You look at the people who are making the decisions, and we're not a club that's got a massive off the field staff, with 17 directors of and heads of and all that sort of thing. We've got very few staff, even fewer now at the minute. But I think he maybe was stretched a little thin because he was doing kind of the sporting director and the CEO role. And I think if we'd have just managed to drag ourselves over the line, things might have looked a bit better next season, especially for him personally, because I think they'd already said we were going to get like a director of football to come in and allow him to kind of concentrate more on the business side. And even if you go back to the last meet the board night, they were full of praise. Oh, he's working every hour God sends, and this guy's professionalised this, that, and the other, and he was getting a lot of praise. But I suppose ultimately, when you're kind of thinking, right, we've got to have to review how we've ended up where we are, and we're going to make some changes. Someone's head's got a roll. I suppose he was the obvious target. I do think he maybe got a bit more flack than perhaps he deserved, in terms of he was almost kind of Schrodinger's head of recruitment, in the fact that when everything went well, it was nothing to do with him, it was the managers, and then when the players went badly, it was always bloody Ian Wood's fault signing Crocs and this, that, and the other. And I think we're always kind of going to be vulnerable is not the right word, but I think it's always going to be fairly precarious in terms of recruitment when you're dealing with a budget that's 14th, 15th in the league. You're going to have to take punts. Apologies for the vulgarity, but you can only piss with the cock that you've got. We're not going to sign a squad that's got 25 leading League Two players in it and be 15th in the wage budget. It's just not reality. And I think at the Gallagher meet the manager night, I kind of cornered Ian Wood in the bar and said, look, I understand we have to take risks. I understand that, you have to set the odd punt. I understand we're not going to get a stellar squad, but please reassure me that, going into this season with Walker, Cameron and Hemmings as our striking options, please tell me that wasn't the plan. Please tell me there wasn't a summit and everyone decided that was the way we were going to fire our way to League Two glory. And he just kind of said, well, no, of course it wasn't. But, the ones that we really wanted didn't want to sign for us. We couldn't compete on wages. Location was an issue for some. Various contractual stipulations were issues with others. So, we can all sit here and say, oh, well, what we should have done is signed X, Y, Z, and we should have done this and we should have done that. But, we keep saying it's that, are they any good? Do we want them? Do they want to come to us, and can we afford them? And if you can't tick all those boxes, then a player isn't going to sign for you. So, he can't round people up and lob them in the back of a van and drag them to FC United and, make them sign and whatever. But so I had a measure of sympathy from there, but at the same time, you kind of look at the various strands of performance, and you look at like the injury record. Again, he's not the one, overseeing the treatment and the medical and stuff, but he's in charge of the person who is. The recruitment, it probably could have been better. So ultimately the buck's got to stop somewhere. I don't know what influence he had on the firing of managers, and then who got the final say on the hiring of managers, because obviously we've made errors there. So it's kind of, we kind of alluded to it before. There's a little bit of blame for a lot of people, but he's probably got his finger in more of the blame pies than anyone else, if that makes sense. So ultimately, I suppose if you are going to present a sacrificial lamb to the support, then the CEO is probably a good place to start. So, he's been with us, 4 or 5 years, which in football terms is a decent spell. So it probably was the best, probably was the best move to, give him a patent of a Spitfire and send him on his way. But, that's football, isn't it? If you're going to get relegated, people are going to lose their jobs. So, I've got a measure of sympathy for him, but ultimately you live and die by result. So, had to happen, really.
Yeah, I was going about there, Dave. I mean, signing Crocs, I don't actually mind. Wearing Crocs, that's a different story. So that's a straight sacking in my book. But Fraser, I mean, how do you sum up his legacy more across the course of the season? Because Dave mentioned there, losing players and recruiting players. A massive issue was with the kind of there was no stacking of us losing our midfield. We lost Gotts, we lost Spence, and we lost Campbell at the same time. That gave us a mountain to climb in terms of replacing players like that. And I think very early on in the season we realised that hadn't happened, and that was going to be an issue for us. And then when you think of the replenishment there and the way the kind of dominoes have fell with a series of managers across the course of the season, I mean, how do you kind of put Ian Wood in the middle of that, and what do you think his legacy is across the course of this kind of relegation and his responsibility for it?
Well, ultimately, it's a football club that's been relegated out of the Football League. That there's, if we're being brutally honest, not loads to show for it. I mean, when he first came in, he was almost. I think maybe his one of his first summer transfer windows went a bit too well when he brought in Campbell and Spence and Aqua and various others who I can't remember. But as you've said, I think the model will have been to bring in Spence, Campbell, Gotts the summer before that. They play really well. We sell them on. That money gets reinvested back into the squad. But then we had a huge vacuum of those three leaving in the summer. And as Dave has outlined, there's no way that our budget was going to get replacements of the same quality. Whether we were limited by budget, or if we could have shopped at a different supermarket or looked more intensively, or that sort of, yeah, in hindsight, yes, we probably should have done. The last two summers really in terms of recruitment have been. I mean, the summer before last was a bit iffy when we signed Andy Dallas, and I mean, Ben Jackson was a good signing on paper, although he's dropped off fairly significantly since. And this summer, I think, there just seemed to be whatever they were following previously, maybe because people are stretched across roles, bit of gravitational sort of budget in there, that it was just more difficult. And then you have three players who, like Robbie Gotts, has been linked with championship clubs. Now that's how good he was. I'm sure Dean Campbell will be snapped up by another League One club now. Northampton have been relegated. Yeah, it was just really difficult to replace. Could have done better with it. Probably shouldn't have. I reckon quite a lot of the teams in this league, if Cheltenham had 5 managers throughout the season, or Shrewsbury had 5 managers throughout the season, they would have been in hovering around 30, 35 points as well. So you've got to have that stability, and I think. I do believe, I mean, it's early days that now, the pace of the decisions made since Saturday, that we are hitting the reset button, but we need to continue to hit the reset button, push it down, and try and give ourselves the best chance of being competitive next season.
Yeah, I think for me as well, I think being specific on certain decisions, because we've mentioned this on the pod before, and the relegation is a collection of shortcomings over the course of the last couple of seasons. Really, that's led us to that point. But along that way, and certainly towards the back end of this season, there were some things I think that were colossal in effect in terms of getting us relegated. And I think back to the Gallagher appointment. I think back to the sacking of Wing, not really having a plan in place to replace Wing, toying with the MacDonald idea for a little bit, and then bringing Gallagher in. Steve mentioned this in his brilliant match report after the game. It's kind of, what did he say, a porter cabin appointment or something. He looked out the window and just said he'll do, or something like that. And the players seem to like him. And then he gets that crucial window, and then 6 games are disastrous. I think, rumours are there, Dave, and certainly circulating that was a decision that lays firmly on Ian Wood, where certain other people on the board might have been looking for a more pragmatic response, someone like Marmaria, who eventually came in down the line. And so, yeah, I suppose the question is, I know it's a collective mistakes and a collection of shortcomings and incompetencies, but do you think, looking back over the course of the season, there is one key decision that cost us our Football League status?
If you put a gun to my head, it will probably be appointing Gallagher and giving him the window, because it turned out to be what he was. He was an under-23 coach who's probably comfortable with young players, and that's what we ended up signing. I think if you appoint Dino Marmaria on Boxing Day, then January looks a lot different, and he probably would have recruited 3 or 4 absolute bastards who would have, executed Dino Ball to a T and probably would have got us enough points. I mean, the Gallagher appointment, even at the time, I thought was a bit not dodgy, but it just reeked of because you've got a guy who's come in to assist the caretaker, who then becomes the manager and kind of like leapfrogs him. It's like I've never known that situation before. I mean, if anyone's watching this on YouTube, please let me know and stick it in the comments. But I can't recall anything like that. And yeah, going back to the not having a plan when we sat wing. I mean, we should have had someone lined up. It was quite funny. I was listening to York's owner on a podcast, or the chairman, Matt Ugler, who's absolutely nailed recruitment. But he's a property investor, so we've got fans who don't think we should have an agent in charge of recruitment, but maybe a property investor, step forward. And he said, I already know who my shortlist is if the manager goes, and they've just won the league, and Stuart Maynard's getting chaired around York on supporters' shoulders, and he's the absolute hero. But the owner's pragmatic enough to know to think, if he goes under a bus tonight, or if he gets tempted away by a championship club or something, we've got a football club to run. So I already know the next the 3 people I'm picking the phone up to. I mean, maybe he did have that succession plan, and they all just turned around and said, actually, no, don't fancy it, or clauses or whatever. But surely one of your shortlist has got to be an out of work manager who you can bring in. So yeah, that delay from going from wing to whoever was next, and then compounding it by that bizarre situation of the kind of the interim assistant to the interim caretaker then becoming the permanent. I don't know. As I say, I've never seen that before, and I don't think we'll be seeing it again. Certainly not at our football club.
Yeah, hopefully not. I think when you look back at the season and you're talking, it's still fresh in the memory, but when you're talking about it there, and I've been thinking about this myself, since Saturday, you kind of think, how are we ever going to get anything other than relegated? It's like, if you tell that story of our season to somebody who doesn't know how it ends, there's going to be no surprise there for that person to find out, oh, and by the way, in the end, we got relegated after, having 5 managers and doing all the things that you just explained. And I think ultimately it is right. I mean, I never like to see someone get sacked. I mentioned before, I met Ian Wood twice. First time I met him was when I was invited down to the training ground with my son, who was, I think, 6 years old at the time, and just started out being a goalkeeper in a local side. And he went down to meet Farman, and Wood showed me around. Just really, really personable, nice, great guy. And then the second time when I met him was for the Beans interview. We seem to be giving people the kiss of death, by the way. We stick them on the cover of Given Beans. Clement's Wing, they've all been on there. And I think what stood out to me, and sometimes I think, who am I to judge, or who am I to know what's right or wrong? I just kind of think it might be a classic case of the Peter principle, in a way, where somebody gets promoted to the point of their sort of incompetency. So, because there was no doubt when Ian Wood came in, it was more of an SOS from Paul Hornby. It's like, we've got stuff coming out of our ears. We've got paperwork piling on our desk. We've got poor contracts with players. We're being ripped off left, right and centre for agents. And Ian Wood did seem to come in and go, hang on a minute, you're paying how much for him, and you're doing this? And we had this conversation before, and I think there was so many good foundational stuffs he did that helped us sustain ourselves as a Football League club, maybe for longer than we might have deserved, considering the kind of non-league legacy that hung around the club. So I do think there's some element of thanks to that. But then I think relying on him too much and putting him into that position, of CEO, and even Hornby said himself, that he's being spread too thin. We're going to get a director of football. You mentioned that before, Dave. Had this season ended not in relegation, he kept his job. There's no doubt he wouldn't have been in that same role next year wearing all them same hats. So, but I'll never kind of forget when I asked Ian Wood the question about organisational structure, and how we're coping with that, and have we got the right people in place to help out with the right things? And he kind of just gave me an answer that said, yeah, we're doing all right. We're coping. And it made me kind of think that maybe he's not experienced enough to know where and how he needs help in the areas that we do to survive here. And when shit hits the fan, which it did in this season, that all came tumbling down, and ultimately we paid the price. So let's move on to a little bit more about that, the structural stuff and some of the other staff members that have gone. But let's just go to the soccer line first, because we had a message that that covers some of them topics.
07
Hey guys, it's Punks back here with another Soccer Line entry. Recording this one on location today in Urswick. Out here running an errand and squeeze this in while I can. So this one is from a friend of the show, Nige Walker. Back with another message for us. So here goes. For some reason the Soccer Line doesn't appear to be working. Nige, it is working. It's always working. Anyway, what went wrong? Have you got a few hours? Here's my take. With any organisation, you have to have leadership, clarity, what your aims, structures, etc. That leads me to the board. Yes, I do know without them that we're fucked. But the following points need addressing. Sort out the football inside. Director of football to work in tandem with the manager. This should involve recruitment, playing style, training facilities. Also looking at how we prepare players, i.e. avoid injuries. Another director to sort out sponsorship, budgets, staffing, etc. Another director responsible for future stadium investment, new investment, other opportunities to enhance the club. Another director to look at how we involve fans, community. No disrespect to Adam, brackets Johnson, who is brilliant, but Hornby talking to him doesn't cut it with me. After the last meeting, it was obvious the board are in need of help. I think they need extra members to share the workload. This should not involve them having to put money in. You could make them non-executives. Well, can't think of anything else. Barrow, don't we love them? But hey, they're like having a relationship with someone who's got a split personality. Don't know if you can use that. Well, we are using it, Nige. And thank you very much for your message. We do have one more, and it's very brief. And this one's from Nick. And it just simply says, Killian Barrett. So with that, guys, back to the studio.
Yeah. So
Harsh on Barrett, wasn't it? It wasn't his fault.
unless he's going, Killian Barrett.
Is that the start of a new chant for him for next season? Who knows?
Yeah. Surprised to see him. I think we all were. And maybe we'll see more of him. Like I said, he was, I think he, by all accounts, I mean, people are pretty impressed with his performance and don't really hold him responsible for that goal. So you never know what's going to happen over the summer from a goalkeeper situation. So, yeah, Fraser, I mean, you touched upon there about organisational structure. We've had quite a lot of staff leaving. Obviously, Ian Wood is the biggest piece to fall. Everyone else has gone with him. You talked about wiping that slate clean. Are you happy with that? In a sense, you touched up on before to say that that's a really good thing. It's proactive in a sense. We've had finished the season that we're already kind of wiping the slate clean for the next one.
Yeah, no, I think it was needed. I mean, it was just when you try and fix things so many times, like we'll have this season, there's just a succession of like random coaches. There's Graham, Simon, there's the goalkeeping coach, there's some of the David Worrell who seemed to, I'm sure he's a very capable coach in his own right, but just him being there is just like negatively associated, like just associate him with with the rubbish we've been served up this season. Although I'm sure it's not really his fault. Yeah, I think it's the right thing. Clear the decks. Chase Homer's still here, I think. Got a new head of medical, which is obviously going to help to address the injury issues, because we haven't looked. There's something been going on with injuries all season. We haven't looked fit enough. Just depends what they do next. Managers, head coaches, directors of football.
Yeah, and do you think, Dave, in terms of replacing some of them roles, it's really gonna rely on sort of who the manager is next?
Yeah, I think it was initially, apart from Worrell, who's kind of seen a few reigns come and go. Coughlin was Foley's man. Ireland was Marmaria's man. The goalkeeping coach was Marmaria's. So it was just a case of, thanks very much. We'll kind of just, clear some space for the new guy when they come in. Yeah, the medical, again, as Fraser says there, something's not been right on the medical side, on the injury side. Whether it's because we've, again, going back to recruitment, are we signing fragile players? The training ground's not the best in terms of facilities. Training on AstroTurf and then playing on grass isn't great for your muscles. So that's obviously a contributing factor. So again, that's not the previous head of medical's fault. But when you look at a club and a team that's had our injury catalogue, I don't know, I think it's just a bit of a palate cleanser, isn't it? And say, right, hopefully that's that part and it'll improve next time. And I noticed the statement for Mark Leather coming back said that, his last tenure, we had the lowest number of injuries, because this is something that clubs they have to submit stats to the FA and to the AFL, so that they can track, as part of their kind of player protection policies and stuff. They can track whether injuries are because of, is it muscle injuries, is it impact injuries, is it this, that, and the other, so that if the EFL season goes to, it's 46 games plus the Noddy Cup plus the EFL plus, they can turn around and say, well, actually, due to your care to your players, we recommend no more than 50 games a season or whatever it is. So all this stuff gets tracked and they have to provide medical reports, obviously. But from a punter's point of view, our injury list was almost as long as the squad list at some points, wasn't it? So in terms of something must be done, something's been done. So let's hope it improves for next season.
Best magic sponge in the business. So welcome back. It's easy hires in a sense, in it, because I suppose, like I say, from a manager point of view, you can't imagine they'd have too much issue with people on the medical staff payroll, but coaching and things like that, that's going to be interesting to see who we appoint, which apparently, according to all sources and communications, they're well on with that. Is there anybody, Fraser, who's kind of taking your fancy? And a few names have been mentioned.
I like Adam Johnson. I'm a big fan of Rob Elliott, the Gateshead manager. Namely, I live in Gateshead, so it's no. But I think he should. I was surprised he wasn't linked when Wing was dismissed. Maybe like you'd be a safer pair of hands in the National League than you would potentially be in League Two. But he did a magnificent job with Gateshead, and he's really good at bringing in players. So he was a director of football there before he was the manager. He seems to just be able to pluck players out of thin air, which is precisely what we need at the minute. Some other names. The manager of Fylde, is it Craig Marn? Could be a shout. He's had an excellent start to his career thus far. Has National League North experience, but no National League experience. He'll be sought after. The South Shields manager, Ian Watson. I think there could be a bit of a Gateshead, South Shields, Hebburn Town. Hopefully us managerial merry-go-round. And I've just scribbled down Kevin Nolan for a laugh, because I don't know. He was a bit rubbish in League One, but he might fancy a conference job. I'm sure other names are available, but yeah. Do you have any thoughts, Dave?
I think that I oscillate between the safe pair of hands in terms of just throw the keys at John Coleman and say, right, go on, John, sort us out. recruitment-wise, he knows the Northwest market inside out, especially, he was always great at getting loans from Premier League and Championship clubs when he was at Accrington. Against that, he's not really set the world on fire when he's not been at Accrington, but I think he'd at the very least he'd stabilise us, and I think he'd have that authority with the squad and within the club, because he can put medals on the table and say, well, I've taken Accrington to League One. Like, what have you done? Exactly. So it'd have that kind of reputation and that caliber, which might stand us in good stead. Otherwise, I don't see us going for someone who's currently in a job, purely because I don't think we'll pay the compensation. Because if we're looking at slashing budgets and kind of saving money to revamp the playing side, then it depends what the terms of these clauses are. But I can't see us paying compensation. So, would we perhaps go down the young manager route again, or like a recent retiree? I think maybe the Gallagher experience puts you off that, but you can't avoid that forever. It's maybe it was just that one man at that one time that was wrong. There's no prescription. Jason Taylor, he's been an assistant for for a while. He's kind of worked up from, was he set piece coach, assistant manager? He might fancy a crack at the job. I believe we've probably got a better chance of enticing him now that Ian Wood's gone than if he was still in the building, because I believe there's bad blood's probably a bit too harsh, but I don't think Mr. Taylor would have shed any tears to hear that Ian Wood had gone. So who knows? As always, we're just wildly speculating. But I'd like to think it'll be done fairly soon. Purely so we can get a head start on recruitment for the summer, and hopefully trying to weed out some of the ne'er-do-wells that we've got in the current squad.
Yeah, I've kind of got a feeling it has me. I think something will happen over the next couple of weeks, certainly. To give us the best chance to have the summer and recruit. And I mean, moving on to players as well, Fraser, because as everyone well knows, quite a lot of them are contracted. So I'll just run through that list quickly. Stanway, Winterbottom, Raglan, Shipley, Anderson, Jackson, Harper, MJ Williams, Newby, McCann, Smith, Barkhazen, Whitfield, Coyote, forgot his name, Fletcher and Rose are all contracted to play another season for us. And when we put this on the Given Beans group and kind of did a keep get rid list, there's only really a few consensuses around them. So there was a suggestion there within the group, and even listening to the social the other day and hearing what, kind of Chris Ultry's thoughts and Ian's thoughts, that everyone kind of has a feeling there is a core of a potentially decent side here, and we could go down in relatively good health if some of these players were to shine in the National League in combination with some good recruitments around them. I mean, now the kind of disappointment of last season, is quickly fading. Do you kind of turn your thoughts more towards that and think about life in the National League and what it could mean?
Yeah, some of these should be more than good enough. Whether they're the right characters, that's a big question mark. Whether they're up for it, that's another one. I mean, you can have a look at that team. It's this similar to what the problem was in January. Need a right back, right wing back of some description, maybe even two, a left back, a big plank up front. We're quite well supplied in terms of wingers, attacking midfielders, and set centre midfielders. So yeah, it is quite. I think it's quite easy to diagnose if we're going to make 4 or 5 really carefully targeted signings. It just depends on who moves on, who doesn't fancy it. Yeah, I mean, I'm strangely sort of optimistic about this, but listen, they've got to be the right characters. To be honest, I think that we need some leadership in there and people who'll uplift the rest of the squad, because they weren't getting uplifted last season. No disrespect to those the senior players. It would seem really difficult.
Yeah, talking of senior players, Dave, you had a chat with Canavan after the game. It was quite an interesting discussion you shared with us. Do you want to divulge to our listeners?
Well, it lasted about over half an hour, so we'll have to keep the full length version for the Patreons. But to be fair, Niall said that he potentially would come and do an interview for Given Beans later on in the summer, so I won't do chapter and verse. I think if I was to summarise his diagnosis for what had gone wrong this season, would be more in terms of the character of the people that we recruited rather than the talent. And I think from the conversation, I always used to laugh about Pete Wild and his good lads philosophy, and 11 good lads will do you better than 11 talented players over the course of the season. But I think what Canavan was kind of saying after the game was, if you compare the team that narrowly missed out on the playoffs, even though they obviously had the failings because they couldn't make the final step, but he said, if you just go through that man for man and character for character, it's night and day. And I think probably Saturday showed that. We looked really bright in the first half, didn't we? We looked as though we were a half decent football team that had actually trained together and had the semblance of a plan. And then as soon as McDonald had his brain fart, it all just fell apart. And you're thinking, well, again, looking forward to next season, you're thinking, yeah, on paper, a lot of these players should be talented enough to do something in the National League. But if you haven't got the mental strength to defend properly at Shrewsbury, as we were pathetic at Shrewsbury, are you going to do it at Eastleigh? Are you going to do it at Solihull when there's 1,100 people and it's pissing down and there's, you're looking around thinking, is this my career now? Are those players who we think in a good light with a fair following wind should be talented enough to do a decent job in the National League? Are they going to have the mental strength to do it? I don't know. I've probably got my doubts, to be honest. But I don't think we need to get rid of absolutely everybody. But for me, if we can move them on, I would rather see more of them go than stay, if possible. But hopefully, the ones that do stay will respond to a better manager, and manager singular would be nice, at least for the rest of the calendar year. And the signings that come in hopefully are going to be proper characters and proper leaders, because I think that's over the grind of a National League season, which is even grindier than League Two. That's what we need. So yeah, if I'm in a good mood, I think 7 or 8 of these should do a great job. If I'm in a bad mood, like I've been for most of last season, I want to get rid of as many as possible.
Yeah, looking forward to a bit of grinding in the National League. Fraser, you've been doing a bit of research, haven't you, in terms, because we're always talking about teams going up from the National League into League Two, and everybody talking about 3 up, 3 down, and the fact that no team had ever gone up and then gone back down, even though we very nearly did. Tell us a little bit about that in reverse.
Okay, then. So I've ran the numbers, running the numbers, scribbling down stuff on bits of paper, having scoured Wikipedia of what's happened to every team from the last 10 seasons who has been relegated from the EFL to the National League. So I've got 18 teams here in 10 years, some caveats. Macclesfield going out of extinction and going out of extinction? Out of existence. And obviously the COVID points per game silliness, which got us promoted in the first place, but that's for another day. So basically 18 teams in 10 years, 3 out of the 18 went down to the National League North or South. So that's York, Scunthorpe and Morecambe in the first season. So very, very few. The average position on the first season down is an 11th place finish. 6 out of 18 of the teams finished their first season in the National League in the playoff positions. Only Grimsby have managed to go straight back up. They finished 6th in the playoffs and got promoted straight back to the EFL. And 7 out of the 18 teams that have gone down the last 10 years are presently in the EFL, and many doing quite well. So Notts Counties, Barnets, Chesterfields, Oldhams, and our friends in York, who are the newest additions.
No, where did York go up? I must have missed that. What do you think about that, Dave? Proper insight.
Yeah, I must admit, my pessimistic side was kind of thinking, if we went down, we might go down again. But that's just a bit of an overreaction, to be honest. I don't think, looking at the firepower and the budgets of some of the clubs that are in National League, we probably won't be able to compete wage bill wise with Carlisle, Forest Green, Southend, teams like that. But I also look at the table and think Halifax barely had 2 halfpennies to rub together, and they were, did they finish one place outside the playoffs, albeit a lot of points behind. So it doesn't take a lot to be competitive in the National League. I think if you've got a half decent budget and you're organised and you've got a plan and you know what you're doing and you're consistent, then you've got a chance. I think listen to when Carlisle played at Tamworth, and James Phillips was saying, Tamworth have been competitive and their budget, did he say 750 grand or something like that? It wasn't a lot. It wasn't masses, and they were competing very well with Carlisle with a budget of 4 and a bit million. So again, we don't know what Paul Hornby's magic spreadsheet's going to come up with, but if we're paying 3 million this year, if you knock 1 million off to kind of compensate for the fact that we're income's going to be down and central funding and all that sort of thing. I know we get parachutes, but even if you've got a budget of 2 million quid, you should be reasonably competitive. And I think if we are taking lessons from history as well, I think when we got booted out of the league in 72, I know it was difficult because there was no kind of automatic, wasn't even 1 up, 1 down in them days. Never mind 3. It was all done on a vote, and everything seemed all lost, and we carried on plummeting. But maybe in 72, if we'd have had a local benefactor who would have thrown a load of money at it, we could have gone straight back up. In a nutshell, I've no idea, to be honest, but hopefully we'll be looking at on the first page of CFAX at the league table for most of the next season, rather than the second page as we have been for the last couple of years. So yeah, I don't know, should we break the habit of a lifetime and try and be optimistic? Should we give that a go?
Do you know what? I think, yeah, I think for once the pain of the season and the reality of, exiting from the Football League is kind of dealt with. I do think we'll look towards next season, especially with the slate being wiped clean from, a CEO point of view, manager point of view, all the staff and all of the kind of bad smells of the season that would have lingered had they stayed on any longer. I think we will look towards going down in National League in better health than we maybe even were when we were promoted, in terms of budgets and infrastructure within the ground, and just having much more of a league style structure and presence about us potentially. Who knows? I think we might start to turn towards some rather optimistic ambitions. And also, big news on Saturday, Fraser, our friends Carlisle, fell at the first hurdle in the playoffs. So you're looking forward to playing them, or you're kind of dreading that as well?
I don't know, dreading it a bit. It'll be interesting. I'll be getting on the train from Newcastle to Carlisle. Last time went there in 2021, it was an incredibly spicy affair. But I don't know. We don't usually do well against them. And if they sell out our away end, which they no doubt will do, then that's Paul Hornby will be absolutely elated with that. So yeah, no, I'm looking forward to that. I think some of their fans may regret going a bit early on Saturday when we got relegated. I was at this wedding. There were some people from Carlisle there, but weren't Carlisle fans, and we were sort of going, "Oh, have you seen this challenge by Luamba and stuff like that?" And then obviously he got sent off, and the loss against Tom White and Reagan Beauty's Borehamwood side, who go on to play Rochdale. So yeah, I don't want to wish Borehamwood good luck, especially seeing as they're like a recurring subject on this podcast. But it's nice to see Tom White and Reagan Beauty do well.
Yeah, certainly. And I think, Dave, what about you? He kind of cheer you up a little bit.
Well, our friends in the north falling at the at that hurdle. I had a wry smile, but it's what Mark Hughes does, isn't it? And surely when there's three sides of Brunton Park shouting his name at the last, chanting for him at the last game of last season when he took them down after widening the gap to safety. For some reason that was befitting of Messiah status for that lot up there. Who knows? They have to take responsibility for it because that's what Mark Hughes does, isn't it? He gets teams in a decent position, then he fails in the playoffs. That's kind of what it does on the tin. So whether they, roll the dice and get a new manager in, I don't know. I think kind of the terms of football finance dictate that usually the people who pay the most money, by and large, tend to get the best players, and if you can keep them fit, you do all right. So I'm sure they'll challenge again. I don't particularly enjoy the derby games. I mean, Carlisle's an all right city for a drink. When you're actually there in the city itself, it doesn't really feel like a derby. Like the old gadgies in the pubs. I mean, certainly I go to the old man's pubs. They're just glad to have a reasonably localish team up in they kind of got that northern solidarity. I think it's just certainly online where the banter is the word tedious, is the word drivel. I had a few kind of biscuit crumbs on my timeline at the weekend, but it was. I don't mind if it's funny or if it's intelligent. I don't mind, but I don't know. You don't want to label an entire fan base as being tediously thick, but you've got to deal with what's in front of you, haven't you? So I don't really enjoy the build up to the Cumbrian Classico and all that sort of thing. As I've said many times, it's a derby by function of a radio station, and having a shared knowledge of James Phillips isn't the basis of a derby in my mind, to be honest. But there you go.
I think it certainly adds something to next year, and we can have a particular look forward to that game when you consider our record. But I think with Morecambe going down, I think it's nice to have something, to look at on a fixture list next year, and you never know, we might have a bit of fun in the process. We're going a bit longer tonight. I'm going to end with this one, just to keep it nice. 6 years in the Football League, Dave. Any highlights stand out? What were your best moments?
I think obviously you got to think about games like Bradford away, and it mainly was the away games when you go into bigger stadiums and proper stadiums. Ones that you've seen on the telly and in the Premier League. So your Bradfords, your Swindons, going to places like that, not just as an equal, but getting the better of them. And I think it's just the general all-round status and properness of being in the Football League. You go into actual towns and cities that people have heard of. I always say that, when we're in the National League North, and the amount of times I've had to explain to people what's an Alfreton and where is Gainsborough. And, you're kind of going back to a bit of that in terms of, where is Eastleigh? Oh, well, it's an airport near Southampton. Right, okay, that sort of thing. So yeah, just generally having a bit of properness, and seeing decent away followings every now and again in that away end. And in terms of low lights, which I suppose is the next question, probably the two games that felt like I've been ran over by a bus were the Doncaster capitulation a couple of seasons ago, and then Fleetwood this season. And another low light, I will say, and it I don't know, it might just be me, but I was disappointed by how quickly the novelty kind of wore off for some people, especially as we missed the first season because of COVID. Kind of, there's people I knew who'd watched utter bilge in non-league for 20 odd years, and then after 2 or 3 in the EFL, they were almost getting bored of it. And like when we drew Derby in the EFL Cup, no, it's not the most attractive of draws, is it? It's like, sorry, former champions of the Football League, Derby County, who have been in the Premier League and are a really big club. That's not good enough for a fan base that's been fed on Alfreton and Matlock and Buxton and people like that over the. I just couldn't get my head around how kind of entitled some of our supporters got very quickly. But we all see life through a different lens, don't we? So I hope those people will kind of, when they're on the terraces next year, might think, actually, I should maybe have appreciated that a wee bit more, to be honest, at the time, because who knows when we'll get to experience it again. Hopefully it won't be another 48-year gap, but you never know in football, do you?
Yeah, I was certainly not one of them. I was constantly,
Me neither.
just buzzing about being a football league, and I never ever took it for granted in that sense. Fraser, go on, give us a couple.
I echo what Dave says, maybe with slightly less sass. Stockport away, first game, Pete Wild, 1,000 odd away fans in Edgeley Park. I lived in Stockport at the time. I don't live in Stockport anymore, thankfully. No disrespect to Stockport, it's a nice town, but they were giving it like the big one beforehand. They're like, the thought they were just going to absolutely stuff us, roll us over. It's funny, this old Ben Whitfield to us, and he scored with 3-0 up at half time. Some absolute limbs in the away end. One young man there sustained a pretty severe injury, which I'm sure he would be delighted about us bringing it up again. Greg, if you're listening, nearly landed on top of me, I think, in the open terrace. But no, that was great. 3-2. I'd returned from the Basque Country. I was drinking Calamocho. I went to a pub in one of the best pubs in the country afterwards. And it was just that was great. Set us off on 2 really, really good seasons under Pete Wild, where we bloodied quite a lot of noses on the way.
Yeah, I like it. And Fraser, there, prove yourself as one of our more sophisticated guests living in a leafy Cheshire, holiday in the Basque region. Right, I'm going to end with this little contribution from the soccer line, I think. But before I do, I just want to say thanks to Dave, thanks to Fraser, thanks to everybody, actually. This is the last podcast of the season. There's some plans over the summer, but it's obviously going to be a bit more infrequent as we don't have much game stuff to talk about and things like that. But there's certainly some things being spoke about. So maybe we'll get some players, ex-players, some stories, maybe some 125 stuff, and whenever we get the chance to jump on the pod and talk about something good, exciting, and interesting, we'll certainly do that. But yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in big numbers, across the course of the season. It's really kept us going. It's always been a pleasure in that sense, and to all the people who've contributed, across different teams as well that we played, always willing, always happy to send in voice notes and make this pod just that little bit more interesting. It's something we'll continue to do next year. Have Eastleigh got a podcast, Dave? Do you know if we can get any Eastleigh fans in like that? Maybe if it's not busy in the airport. No. Anyway, let's leave you with this one, and we'll wrap up there. Cheers, Fraser. Cheers, Dave.
Cheers, Jonny. Cheers, everyone.
It's me, Punks, again. Back here, last minute entry, right before the deadline. This one's from Al, and it simply says, as sad as it is to go back down to non-league, I'll still be there on the terraces, cheering them on. Love a bit of non-league football.